before we do apply for the concessions to mine our limestone, we recognize the fact that there's a livelihood of the people in that area. And so when we are done, we try to reinstate the natural habitat as we found it, and we do it to the best of our ability. And we do this in an ideas contest that brings in students of biodiversity. And the ideas are actually handsomely rewarded. As we slide along, you will see evidence of very handsome rewards that have been given to these students that have come up with very, very good biodiversity projects that have bettered the lives of the people where we do quarry mining. We're big on tree planting, and you will see very soon in pictures how we have done that consistently every year. Even before the government announced their tree planting agenda, we've always been doing that in the quarry sites as well as in our factories in Tema and in Takoradi. We also partner BirdLife worldwide through the Ghana Wildlife Association in Ghana. So recently we embarked on a project called Spring Life, where we bring students from secondary institutions and universities, and they help us to mount bed boxes that are fed constantly with food and drinks, water, to ensure the birds get some very habitable place to fly and rest at the end of the day and have something to eat. So that's an initiative that we also take on board so seriously. National Road Safety Commission is partnering with us. If you drive through town, you may have seen that small GASEM signboard that's letting you that don't drink and drive, don't drive tired. If you've driven a long distance, take a break, those things. It's our little commitment to preserving lives on our roads, because road accidents is very, very high. And this is our contribution to ensure that we're alerting people on what to do when they're on the roads. Health and safety conscious is clearly part of our policies, as I mentioned. In GASEM, we say if it's not safe, do not even attempt to do it. So if you put yourself in harm's way, there's a reward for someone who finds you out and actually speak up. And there's a big signboard for numbers, hotlines that go straight to the EHS manager. And if you're found doing something that will endanger your life or a near miss of a sort, you're called to book. And the person that announces this or reports this to the EHS manager gets rewarded. So it's a reward for you to find something and say something, as well as do something about it. And so we are all keepers of each other as far as our health and safety is concerned. Compliance and law abiding, because we are a member of the IFC, or IFC is actually a part owner of the business, and they do not joke with compliance. Every other week, we have to go through compliance training, and you'll be audited at some point on how prudent you are with the quality management system, first of all, as well as what constitutes corruption or near corruption, or anything that, they normally say to you, if you're taking lunch or, gift from anyone, do not let it be anything above the cost of lunch. I'm sure the big question will be, what is the cost of lunch? But you're certainly being told, do not take gifts that will, if you will, influence you in a corruptible way. So this is quite big on our agenda, and everyone goes through this, from the CEO or the managing director down to the least of our staff. GASEM has invested in new products that are less cementitious, deliberately to reduce the clinker incorporation in cement, because we believe that clinker incorporation emits a lot of carbon dioxide into the environment, because we burn clinker at a very high temperature. And we believe that if you use less clinker in cement, you definitely need clinker in cement. It's the biggest component you have in cement manufacturing. But if you can use less of clinker and some more of limestone and maybe some clay material, and still be able to achieve the strength that you're looking for per the standards of Ghana Standards Authority, you're doing something good to the environment. So we are deliberately looking into research to do what we call the calcine clay factory. Last year, we announced a 100 million project. We're still searching for, the deposits that we need should be quality and quantity over a period of time that will last you to recoup your investment. The investment is quite huge. So where we thought we had found a good deposit of clay to do this job, quality clay to do the job, we were not entirely accurate on our findings. So we are still doing some work to ensure that we'll be able to invest into a clinker or calcined clay based cement. You can also call that a pozzolana or Portland pozzolana cement. And what simply that means is that it has less cementitious material, which is the clinker. And by the way, we do import our clinker from outside town. We do not mine the clinker locally here. I'm sure if I'm preempting someone asking a question, you say, why don't you mine the clinker locally here? I told you about the carbon dioxide footprints that we have and ensuring that we don't burn too much and send carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You need very high temperatures to burn clinker. I mean, an overly bent limestone will give you clinker as a byproduct. And that is a huge thing for us. We're looking still into that investment, but it's a huge one. And we believe that if we're able to get clinker locally, eventually, it helps actually to bring down the cost of cement. However, the environment may suffer a little bit. But I think it's a little pain we have to go through to have maybe a more reasonable cost in cement. Because the cost of producing a ton or a bag of cement now is very huge. We can't break that down, which necessitates the current price that you see on the market. We are big on corporate social responsibility because between us and our courts, you find, say, 50 pesos, 1 CD, 2 CD, depending on the product you're buying, and how you're comparing these products. Now, what we say is that the difference between us and the others that you buy from the others instead of us, that 1 CD or 2 CD helps us to be able to give 25 to 30,000 bags free to schools and hospitals. Loads of schools and hospitals have benefited from what we call the Gassem Cement Foundation that gives free cement to schools and hospitals that need rehabilitation or renovation of a kind. Sometimes we travel to the villages and you see there are certain schools that are in a deplorable state. These are not schools that are supposed to be suitable for students, but you find students sitting under, this is not even under trees, under structures that are almost collapsing on them. And we pick such projects and support for free. And we have evidence to show these very great projects. This started way back in 2002. Until date, it is still churning out the 25,000 to 30,000 bags free. In every month, we meet and have what we call the Safe Work Talk, because as I mentioned to you, compliance and safety is a big thing for us. And so we will pick a very topical issue on health and safety, and every month, every department will gather around that topic and share ideas led by the EHS team and ensure that we are all keeping abreast with the times and ensuring that we're doing our work in a safe and healthy environment. And that is also a big thing for Gassem. We sell 4 products currently. The Gassem Extra you may not see very often on the market. It's a high impacting product that has a high clinker content, but it's also used for ultra high strength and heavy structural applications. For all the structures you've seen in town that have stood the test of time, the motorway, there are loads of others that I can mention. And I normally say, if you've also checked out the construction going on at the ports for marine construction, we normally have the contractors come to town and we don't even have to go bid for these projects. They come and pick the product at random in the market and they send it back to their home country to test. And they come back and somehow they get to choose us. So we say humbly that we don't go bid for these big construction projects because the quality speaks for itself. And whereas you could use the other grades of products which I'm about to talk about to do a regular construction, depending on how you're doing your ratio mixing of cement to sand to water and how you apply it, these contractors do not joke with the integrity of the structures they are building, especially if you check the expansion of the port berth at the Jubilee stretch. The kind of construction that was done is such that you can't buy a cheap product on the market to save cost, because cheap may turn out to be very expensive eventually. The black one you see next to it is the 42.5R. What the Standards Authority is saying to us is that at the end of 28 days, you should see a test of a measure of 42.5 are megapascal or Newton per square meter. That's how they measure the strength level at the end of 28 days. And if you're molding your blocks, your culverts, precast project, this is the cement you need. Now, if you see the way the block makers do their blocks, they like to mold a certain bunch of block and demold them in one area. And they need them to dry quickly so they can actually transport them to pack in stocks of, say, 10, 12. Then they come to the same spot where they demolded and move again. If you have your 42.5R, it dries faster for you, but it doesn't compromise the integrity of the strength you're looking for. So the difference between the N and the R, even though they're all 42.5, is that they are going on a race, let's say on a sprint, for 100 meters. Definitely, the R will get there before the 42.5N gets there, but they all get there at the end of the day. And when they all get there, they all present to you the strength that you're looking for. Now, if you've done your construction and you want to plaster or do your finishing work, you need a super rapid to do that. That is a blue one. It is because even though it says 32.5R is a lower strength compared to the 42.5. And that allows you some time to go back and dress and give you a good aesthetics of the dressing you're doing on the wall. You know the way the masons do it. They mix the mortar and they slap it on the wall, go back and dress. If you're using your 42.5R, by the time you're going back to dress and come back, you leave big pores in the skin of your wall. And this is what normally causes some cracks, even though the cracks are mainly due to chemical reactions in environment. Now, the little brother of the 32.5R is the 32.5N. And the background to introducing that product was to once again reduce the clinker content and replace with some more limestone. We mine our limestone locally in the eastern region. Now, it also still meets the test of 32.5 megapascal at the end of 28 days. Except that, when you compare the two, we were concerned about the cheaper products in the market. And this compares in terms of price to the cheaper product, except that it gives you unraveled quality compared to that product. Marketers have what we call the moment of truth, and marketers know how to talk. So I may go ahead and do all my marketing gimmicks on you, but I say to you, go to the market and buy the product yourself and find a way to use it. And that moment of truth will be staring in your face. You can testify yourself. Now, repeated business is when you've actually come into contact with the product and used, and you can tell yourself that you think this product suits what you want to use it for. So we may talk and do our gimmicks, but all we say is that we recommend you give that product a chance. And when you're done, and you can tell yourself, because you can stress test your blocks if you're using the 42.5R at any highway authority. They have departments all over the place. Go check and they will see the integrity of your blocks for you. If you're using same of the other products, you can actually pick a sample and send it to the standards authority. They will test for you if you want to be sure. Because you will not have the eye to be able to see what quality cement is and what not quality cement is. There are loads of the cement products that we are buying in town, and I'm not mentioning any names, that are imported wholly from outside. The quality in what the scientists call the standard deviation is not assured. Now, we can give you a test certificate to say if you're buying a product from us, it will meet the standard you're looking for. If it doesn't, you can bring the product back and take your money. It's a test certificate that gives you a guarantee. The others will not be able to give you that. Because one moment, because they're importing it from all over the place, from China and all over the place, one moment you can get your strength. And no doubt, some of these products you see out there are quite good in strength at one stage. But there are certain other stages the product quality drops, and you can't tell with your naked eyes. If you're batching and you're doing, for you realtors who build your real estate, if you batch and you set your quantities of, if you're doing concreting, of stone to sand to cement, and you know that you want a certain limited standard deviation such that when you kick in your product, you still get the quality you're looking for, you'd realize that with the other products, you may be having undulating nature of your quality that you're looking for. You batch, you know you're batching, you know what you're looking for. If you get what you're looking for, so be it. But make sure you always go for the best, because you build one time in your life. So Gassem always say, we sell cement of 4 cement grades, but with excellent customer value. This is because we're also the only one that has an MPS methodology that actually surveys our customers on a quarterly basis. And in this methodology, we're asking our customers, what will it take for you to recommend Gasm to your friend, your cohort, someone you know from church to buy Gasm products? And we normally will give you a scale of 0 to 10. If you're giving us 0 to 6, it means that you're really not happy with the product. If you're giving us 7 and 8, it means that you don't really mind. You're one of those who can be blown away easily by the competitor. If the price is cheaper, there you go. That's fine. And they are the promoters. And normally we find out that we have loads of promoters. But we focus more on those who give us 0 to 6 because that is where the business is. We have been able to convince the passives and the promoters that they can use the product comfortably. But we are more interested in those who vote us 0 to 6 because they get that feedback. Steve Jobs says that the customer that talks to you a lot more gives you good feedback for you to do better than what you have always done. So that's where our focus normally is. Now the rest is just to slide you through pictures. So I've just got about 6-7 minutes and I'm done with this. So this is to let you know that we belong to the Heidelberg Cement Group, the world's largest cement and aggregate manufacturer. And we have a strong commitment in new solutions and thinking differently to make our business ever more sustainable. So we're saying if you buy Gasm, you're buying that sustainable material. And we also definitely align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you see the 6 themes signifying driving economic strength and innovation, achieving excellence in occupational health and safety, reducing our environmental footprint. I talked about the carbon dioxide reduction, enabling the circular economy, being a good neighbor, and ensuring compliance and creating transparency. I talked about our tree planting activities. We do this on a yearly basis, and these are trees that we don't just plant, but ensure that regularly we set someone aside who go and water them, and the management normally go and see the tree that I planted a year ago, how is it faring? We water them. If they have weeds around, we weed them. We make sure the trees are healthy and will always grow. We planted so much trees around the entire factories in Takrady and in Tema, and it helps us actually check the wind direction for a little emission of the clinker and everything else we work with in the factory that goes to our neighbors. And that is doing a great job for us so far. I talked about the Spring Alive, a bed housing project, and it's still ongoing. We brought kids from DPS school and some other school around the Tema environs to help build bed boxes to actually house the birds around to ensure that these birds are having a good home and can have something to eat and water to drink. I talked about Quarry Live, and Quarry Live has been in existence since 10 years. And we set this into ideas contest to the extent that whoever wins that ideas contest in Ghana gets to represent Ghana in Germany. And the last time I checked, the last guy who won, which is like 3-4 years ago, won close to about 27,000 euros. My bad. 27,000 euros for his project. Now, it was only for the idea that he actually presented, but we also made him come back home and we invested into his idea. The idea was to check erosion in our mining concessions in the eastern region. We had created so much erosion with the drilling campaigns of our limestone to the extent that we needed to, if you will, level the ground and find a good way to check the erosion. And he was using an elephant grass methodology, which was invested into to help us check erosion. Some get into beehive manufacturing where they nest the bees and the bees produce the honey and they actually sell this. It becomes a commercial venture for them where they live in the eastern region. Finally, we have created opportunities to do an educational drive, and our partnership is with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, KNUST. We felt that it was important to educate the users of cement, your regular masons, architects, the civil engineers. Some of them, interestingly, had less knowledge about the science of cement and how it's applied. So this idea, called the Gasm Mobile Academy, is to have an academy on wheels. What you see there is a 40-footer container that has been retrofitted by the KNUST, and this travels across the country This year, we're going to set off in the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Last year, we went to 6 or so regions. Now, when we go, we have every tent, canopy, chairs in that 40-footer container you see there. We have a whole office in there to do consultation, and we have all the materials you need from your stone, sand, and cement, and we sometimes source some locally. So we set up teaching centers in all the regions, and we gather the masons and the users of cement and share with them. And I say share because these guys are stuck in their ways of doing their business. We're not going to change the way they do their business. We're just going to affect it positively for them to get to know how important health and safety is in the jobs they do, how important the environment is in the jobs they do, and most importantly, the ratio mixes. Sometimes the sun you use for, I have contractors here, and those of you who are into real estate, the sand you use for your construction have a lot of salt in there and has an effect on the chemical you're mixing with cement. A lot of people do not know this. And so we share some of these very basic info and alert you on the things that you're doing that are compromising the construction you're doing. And we always have to impress on the mason out there that the job you're doing, it's a job that is of safety and should be on your head if someone actually gets hurt for the job that you have done. In cantonments, there was a gentleman that did a fantastic project. He did that hurriedly, and by the time he was done and had handed over to the owners, he was leaving the structure, and the structure collapsed, and it fell on himself, and he died. When we checked, we found out that he didn't use the right products. Iron rods, not the right specs. Cement, not the right cement. Sand, very terrible. And it's my little advice, I say this humbly, to our realty companies. We know when you're building your structures that you are going to live in. And I'm not insinuating anything. You go for quality. Do same for the ones that you sell to us. Because when we look at the economic benefits to the detriment of the people who believe in the structures, you can cause a lot of harm to people, even to the peril of their lives. And so it's a little thing that we'll say, because we have come across those kind of situations, and we have a way of picking a sample of, say, concrete, and do a reverse test and see the products that were in that concrete, and can tell that the mixing was done totally wrong, and the wrong products were used. So these are the lecturers from the university that we worked with. Dr. Mafo, KNUSC consultant, architect. Professor Dia, also with the architectural department. Gordon Aqua is a civil engineer. And building technologist, Dr. Ebenezer Titus. These are the guys that we worked with. You can see on the top my white hairy face with my colleagues from the quality assurance manager, to Nanabna Kufuor, the PRO, who is sitting right there, Orekwa Samwadechi, who work with GASM. And we used, now what we did is we had to train students or fresh graduates who are into engineering, architecture, and BT to go to the field and teach these users. So we had to create employment for these guys because we taught them to go teach and impact, and they were paid for the period. We're going to go on the road again, and they're looking forward to it because they'll be paid. It was launched, the provost was there, and I have talked about the GASM Cement Foundation. So I'm recommending to you again, type www.gasm.com or type GASM app on your Android or iOS platforms. Download that app and you see GASM's criteria for what it takes to be able to earn that 50, 100, 200 bucks for a school in your village or anywhere. If you're in Accra, the chances are that you're not doing so bad. We help schools in Accra and Tema as well, but we give a lot more to those who are in the villages. A lot more, because when we go, we see the state of their structures. I attended St. Martin in Paris. If a school from a school like St. Martin in Paris, my primary school applies, we will deny them because they're well-to-do. Mrs. Lass can afford that. Same as if you went to the Central Region and my school in Fansmem applies, I will deny them because the old boys are supporting the school. Same as the University of Ghana. But anyone else who needs that help, truly needs that help, we come to their aid. So I recommend that to you, and continue to patronize GASM, because when you're thinking premium, you have to choose Gasam. Thank you very much. Questions? All right. Any questions for me? I'm told I'll take some questions. Please don't give me hard questions.
Hello. If you have any question, please walk to the mic podium and ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, I assume it's all gone down well. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. A round of applause one more time. We truly enjoyed that. Thank you for that insightful presentation, Benny Fifi Asian from Gasem Limited, my fellow MOBA. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know, this conference is not just for Ghana, it's actually for the entire Africa. So, on that note, I'm pleased to invite our next speaker. She's coming all the way from Nigeria, and we are pleased to have her. She couldn't make it in person, but it's going to be a Zoom presentation. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy as it falls on my shoulder to introduce her. She is a sustainability professional with over 19 years of experience in civil society, media, oil and gas, telecommunications infrastructure, and manufacturing sectors. Her life's purpose is simply to transform industry through sustainability innovation for the prosperity of Africa. She has held diverse roles in the value chain of strategy, project management, corporate social responsibility, what we call CSR, and sustainability. Presently, she leads sustainability in one of Africa's largest manufacturing firms, driving the integration of environmental, social, and governance factors. She supports academia and civil society to bridge the town and gown divide. I give to you Dr. Igazuma Okoroba, PhD, as she speaks to us this fine morning on emerging realities for cities in an era of climate action. It's going to be a Zoom presentation, like I said, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope I can be heard. Hello, how are you all doing? Um, right. Good afternoon to you all. I'm so grateful to be here. I can hear the feedback, but I hope that you can hear me. Can I have some feedback?
Yes, please. We can hear you loud and clear.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. Um, in Nigeria, I'm in Lagos, Nigeria, and it is about 7 minutes to 1 o'clock. So there's an hour difference between our timing. I'm so thankful to the Ghana Real Estate Professionals Association for inviting me to this conference. I hope I haven't missed too much by not being there physically. I really um, wish that I was in Accra to learn from all of you all. So thanks for the warm welcome. I just have a few slides. I would like to share my thoughts on this week. This is World Green Building Week, and it's just my pleasure to be sharing my thoughts at this time. I'll try to share my slides now as I just go through. Okay, so here we are. I'm just here to share on the emerging realities, for
Recording in progress.
our cities, um, for the industry, for the sector. And now I'm just going beyond the real estate sector for society. You know, um, Globally this week, we're discussing the depletion of the ozone layer. We've had two events in the past weeks that have been focused on Africa and climate change. So this is obviously a time when Africa is in the spotlight, especially with regards to climate change. Every day I receive loads and loads and loads of um, invitations from agencies saying, okay, you are in a big industry in Africa. We operate in several countries in Africa, and we want to know what your role and your participation would be like at the Africa Climate Week or at the COP27. And, this is really giving us a time to focus more on our regional context of climate change than on the global context. So I really, really want to thank GREPA for this opportunity just to share my thoughts and to get to reflect more um, locally about how this affects us in as businesses in Africa, and especially for us in the sub-Saharan region. So I'm just briefly just going to go through what the landscape looks like in Africa, what is in it for the built environment, and what really are these realities that we need to reflect on, and the broader value proposition that I want to put forward to all of us professionals here in the real estate industry, and of course, make a business case for an Africa-centric climate action. So this is what we have heard so many times about climate change in Africa, the consequences of climate change in Africa. And I do not know what the other speakers have said, but just looking at their profiles, I know that there's a wealth of experience and knowledge, around how this industry is affected by climate change. We have people in Africa who still deny, climate change, unfortunately, but there is evidence all around us. I mean, it was in the year 2009, I conducted my master's research. I studied MSc in sustainable development, and I conducted it in a region in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. That's the oil-rich region in the Niger Delta. And back then in 2009, the rural women were able to explain to me what was going on with their crops. You know, they didn't know climate change, but they knew, the evidence that there was something going on with the soil, with the weather. There was something definitely that was affecting, their productivity. And I immediately recognized this as climate change. So these are some of the consequences or some of the results of not paying attention, or abusing human activities, yes, and of course also natural effects of climate change. But we see this all the time. I live in Lagos. This is a coastal region, and we hear about properties that have been lost. Insurance companies are increasing their premiums because of the flooding events. We have gutters that no longer convey water from one point to another, because the drainages have nowhere to send water to. So we have floods, we have windstorms, we have landslides, we have air crashes even, and these have mostly been recorded in Central Africa. In West Africa, we've mostly reported floods. And these exceptional floods, especially this one that you see here, that happened in Niger in 2022, caused deaths and extensive damage. And you can imagine, as a property owner, if your house is submerged in this way, the loss, and then imagine the impact on human lives. In North Africa, reports of the effects of climate change are more around, precipitation events, which have led to droughts and, poor patterns of rain. And this, of course, severe weather has led to loss of livelihoods. We've also had hailstorms storms, large, huge hailstorms that have been reported in that part of the continent. So the reports around the effects of climate change have been widely studied, and the Waste Management Organization, the World Meteorological Organization, has shared, what it looks like in Africa. And out of um, um, countries that were surveyed in Africa, these natural disasters were actually shown to have occurred as a result of climate change. We hear about wildfires sometimes in the West, but here we think it's bush burning. A lot of times we think that it's bush burning, but climate change has exacerbated, a lot of these extreme weather conditions that have led to losses. Right. So moving away from that now, what's in it for um, um, us? Why should we pay closer attention to sustainability and to climate change? Isn't this a discussion for civil society? Why is industry, why is private sector becoming more involved in discussions on climate change? I started my career in corporate social responsibility. Initially, we started as community development, and this was in the oil and gas industry. And I have watched the transition, okay, the transition from public relations, trying to manage relationships with communities, host communities, like social license to operate, right? And we have evolved into CSR, where the company sees themselves as a corporate citizen contributing to social good. Now we have moved to another level, and you would see that there's an increase in recruitments, an increase in positions for sustainability. Companies and even public organizations, public agencies are now beginning to find people who are well versed in sustainability, because CSR is not enough. PR slash community relations is not enough. There is a lot of scientific evidence, and now there are protocols and frameworks that are required by industries, private and public sector. And this is driven by the UNFCCC. The UNFCCC Convention, which most countries have aligned with in terms of the 2015 Paris Agreement, speaks to limiting emissions by 1.5 degrees. And this is a tall order for countries, for regions that have had no framework, no regulatory framework, and really have not had systems or technologies that recognize, the impact of not limiting emissions to 1.5 degrees. So we have sort of, in Africa, we have adopted this framework, we've signed up to them, but in terms of implementing them, we're not quite there. We have the SDGs, 17 SDGs, which, are quite popular. And this is one of the things that this conference is promoting. However, the African Union has a set of priorities as well. They are not listed as the SDGs. There are 20 of them. So the Agenda 2063, which is the priority of the African Union for Development, aligns. I saw that the AU has aligned with the SDGs in some way, if you look on their website. And I understand why there was a need to do that. Because while the SDGs were being promoted globally, funding agencies, grant agencies, NGOs, civil society, were requiring or were offering grants for initiatives that were contributing to the SDGs. On the other hand, Agenda 2063 didn't gain that much traction. I wouldn't say that the AU has not promoted it as much, but I would rather say that it is tied to a condition. So when you are advancing protocols and frameworks, there is a condition. And this is why this conference, has a lot of these finance experts that I really wanted to hear from.
you know, just because of the importance of the discussions around investment in real estate and the incentive, for adopting frameworks to limit to limit emissions to 1.5 degrees. So there is, I feel that the Agenda 2063, which actually they are broader, they are broader and they speak to the realities of businesses in Africa, but it's not as popular as the SDGs. Okay, I feel that Agenda 2063 is realizable, is achievable, and is attainable if it was promoted with the same level of incentivization that the UN SDG goals have. And for me, truly, this is really how we can get to meeting the requirement of the Paris Agreement and the nationally determined contributions. So nationally determined contributions are basically these documents that countries um, produce, and they talk about how they intend to achieve, align with the Paris Agreement. In Nigeria, we do have a nationally determined contribution, and they state all the sectors, the contributions that were made, the decarbonization levers that will be adopted to reducing CO2 emissions or contributing to climate change. I have not had a look at Ghana's nationally determined contribution, but this is a way that countries can actually take targeted measures to meeting the Paris Agreement. However, as a sector or as a business, my hope is that the professionals here are also going to think about how they align with the nationally determined contributions, because everything is tying in. We are currently in the process of developing a net zero roadmap, and we, of course, have looked out for opportunities to find funding. And you will find a lot of the time that you would have to state how you are contributing to your sector, okay, your industry sector, and also to your country's national determined contribution. So this is something that businesses in the real estate sector need to pay attention to. Go scoop out your nationally determined contribution and find out those projects or those initiatives that align with your business and how they lead to reducing the national emissions targets set by your country. So talking more about net zero targets, I got this from Climate Tracker, and of course, not surprisingly, you wouldn't find African countries on this analysis now, because there's nothing to track. There's nothing to track. So because the COP27 is holding this year, we have a lot of agencies from Europe, from all over the place coming to say, we want to hear what the build sector is doing, because, for instance, in the cement sector, we contribute. I mean, after the oil and gas, our sector is the next one where we're looking at highest emissions contributions. Talk about transport, talk about the process of making cement and concrete itself. So there is a requirement to show your plan. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about your net zero? What is your target and what is your plan? And so we are juggling numbers. We're looking at possible levers. We're looking at gaps. We're looking at what and ways, that we can identify CO2 reduction measures. So far, we do not have African countries, well, of course, besides South Africa, because of the carbon taxes, obviously, in South Africa. And then perhaps Senegal is also looking at carbon taxes as well. But most of the African countries, we're still looking to see big businesses in the real estate sector that have net zero emissions target announcements that are realistic and validated. We will speak a little bit more about validation. So what is our readiness for COP27? I decided to pick some quotes from the two recent events that I've held around climate change in Africa. There was the one in Netherlands, and then there was also the other one in Gabon, which is the Africa Climate Week. So in this quotes, basically, these are African leaders that are speaking to what Africa needs, how Africa can achieve net zero, and what the expectations are for COP27. There have been numerous pledges from Western countries, and a lot of the time I see that people in my space are complaining about how the West has had this incredible impact or contribution to climate change from the periods of the Industrial Revolution, and you've exploited all the fossil fuels, you've developed, you've advanced, and you turn around and you are setting the same targets and you're benchmarking with Africa, who contributes 3 to 4% to global emissions, and these Western nations, these big advanced Western nations have made pledges of $100,000 and several other pledges in previous COPs, to help developing nations, such as ours in Africa, to address climate mitigation and adaptation. But these funds are not coming. These funds are not coming. So we've had disappointment expressed on different corners. This is the Minister for Environment in Kenya saying that African countries are actually doing quite a lot to fight climate change. And this constant pressure to say, we want to see your net zero in Africa, you're not doing enough, is not fair. So we've had countries like Gabon that are actually protecting areas of their forests, just to help to act as carbon sinks for carbon sequestration. And of course, the impact of this, goes around the world. It's not restricted to Gabon alone. And they are requesting compensation for making those kinds of investments, which also benefits the Western countries who are the major polluters. So we've also had President Macky Sall expressing his disappointment about the participation of other Western nations, to Africa's Adaptation Summit, which held in Netherlands last week or 2 weeks ago. And of course, we had Akinwumi Adesina, of the president of the AFDB, also speaking to how the AFDB is making an investment, and this investment needs to be matched with sort of like a counterpart funding from the Western nations. And we need these countries to meet us halfway. Very interesting stuff. But I like to say that it might sound unfair for industries to be under all of these kinds of pressure, but will we rather sound like the apologists, or are we going to look at the impacts, our vulnerability as a sector, as a people, and as a business, our vulnerability to climate change? So this is where the debate is currently at, and I'm so looking forward to COP27, to see, how this is going to be resolved. So for the built environment, why is it important that beyond the discussion of we contribute the least in the world to climate change, African businesses should not be put under these kinds of pressure, to limit our emissions to 1.5 degrees. After all, there's a huge demand for infrastructure, and we have lots of land, we have lots of resources we are yet to exploit, and you're asking us to keep our fossils in the ground, and all of those kinds of arguments. So these are just the reasons why, some of the reasons why it's important for the built environment to consider climate actions regardless. I'll just speak on the fact that 75% of infrastructure needed by 2050 actually still needs to be built. And I think that Africa has the huge, the biggest potential and opportunities for infrastructure development. When I look at major cities in Nigeria, for instance, everything is clustered around the city. And I wonder whether we really have professional town planners, because when you go to places like my village, you see stretches and stretches and stretches of land, and then you see the major companies, institutions, schools, churches, religious houses, or what have you, hospitals. These facilities are in the urban areas, and this is really what has resulted in the population influx in Lagos. Lagos as a city is cramped. It is cramped in Lagos. And on a daily basis, the city has no records of how many people migrate into this town. Now we have a lot of security in Nigeria. We have the security conflicts happening in the north, right? And other parts of the country where there are poor opportunities for jobs and for businesses. And everybody thinks that Lagos is a commercial hub and everybody, just runs into Lagos. And Lagos is reclaiming land. All the time we're reclaiming the beds of the ocean to build, more, to develop more, to cater for the elites, basically. But what happens to the other strata or the other class of society that would not move to those reclaimed places, that will not move to the new eco cities that have been built? These people end up in squatter settlements. And this is just what happens when development does not go to the rural areas. It's why the building environment is so critical in this discussion about climate change, because you can disperse the population if the right planning is done, if the right designs are done, if the right resources are provided in the right places, if there's a distribution of wealth and opportunities in the rural areas. It is the built environment that can make a change about this. And we will talk about policies as well. But first, recognizing the opportunities that lie in rural areas is something that the built environment really needs to think about if it wants to address climate change. So now the World Green Building Council, identifies 7 values from the built environment integrating sustainability as far as climate change is concerned. Talks about your operating cost, talks about mitigation of risks. There's a high aversion of risks now. I see insurance companies asking more and more questions. There's more requirement for reporting and disclosures just because of that, lower appetite for risk, because climate change now has made risk, a lot more uncontrollable than before. So you also want to think about valuing your assets. You want to think about opportunities for investments. You want to think about your growth of your business, the wider role of the business, your image, the business image, the corporate image, possible partnerships and alliances, especially with agencies that come from the West, associations, real estate associations from the West. Most of the time we make this argument about we are an African business. Our context is different. Our needs are different. Our requirements are different, but this really scales through. I was a member of the Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, which is an organization that validates net zero targets. And every time we have these expert advisory sessions where we're debating about targets, should we include recarbonization as a lever or not? And we are making a strong argument coming from the African industry. And we are saying that, of course, recarbonization should be considered because Africa has huge resources. We have forests that have become carbon sinks, but a majority of the voices in the room come from the Western industry. And you would see our voices drowning. And they would say, no, we want you to consider CCUS, that's carbon capture, utilization and storage, and other technologies that we haven't seen in this region, So it is so important, to be part of these global agencies. But these global agencies, they tend to require things from you, conditions from you that often do not build in the African context. And this is why having the built environment speak about climate change and consider what needs to the value that needs to be gotten from that discussion is important, so that you can forge better alliances with these agencies. Now, what are the ways that the real estate sector can forge better alliances? We have the disclosures. So you probably have seen some of these standards and disclosures. Some of them are sector specific, like the CDP. This was formerly the Carbon Disclosure Project. Now it's a disclosure inside action. So you get to disclose, you can disclose on water, on forests, but these are generally frameworks that investors, and other shareholders are interested in, just seeing how just rating the risks of dealing with your company or a business. So SASB has industry specific templates. I think there's particularly one for the real estate sector. So you actually might want to just check, the criteria or the disclosures that are required of the real estate sector, for a SASB reporting standard. We have the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative. This is less rigorous than some other ones, of course. And there's TCFD as well. TCFD is also now more climate change specific, and increasingly investors are asking if you're reporting using TCFD. So if you look at annual sustainability reports of big businesses in the built environment, you might find that they sign up to more than one framework. So where we were mostly aligning with the SDGs, now there's an increased requirement for GRI, and then we signed up with the GRI. And then there was increased requirement, oh, we want you to do CDP. Okay, so now we report to the CDP, and with every reporting framework that you adopt, you would have to align, and now we're hearing about TCFD and so many others. But you also want to look at, if you have partners that are listed on exchanges like the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, you also want to see their reporting requirements, because these exchanges actually want you to disclose the climate risks of your business, and disclosing on those things actually helps you to identify, those risks. And what we do is develop a climate risk register, which is just a way of monitoring and tracking these actions and making sure that before the next reporting year, you would be able to show that you have made some progress. The Cement Sustainability Initiative is for those of us that are in the cement industry, but I'm sure that in whatever industries that you are, you would also have, if this already doesn't exist, but there's going to be, a sustainability, there's going to be a sustainability standard that is focused on just that industry. And this is very, very critical. And so the associations, the World Cement Associations, Global Cement and Concrete Associations, align their membership requirement with the Cement Sustainability Initiative. I've also added the science-based targets, because science-based targets initiative is the standard that is used to validate your net zero target. So if you have plans to develop a roadmap for your decarbonization, you might want to review the science-based targets initiative just to see that you're aligning with these requirements. Right. So what are these realities that now, our sector needs to pay attention to, as an African business? We're going to these are not new to you, but we're just going to reflect a bit more on policy change. How policy change has affected so many things in industry. It just simply amazes me that when pronouncements are made by government, sometimes governments will make pronouncements and might not follow through. Industries operating in that country are then required to align in some cases, but in some cases are not required to align. So in the case of Nigeria, Nigeria is signed up to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2060. Now, it would interest you to know that even though the government has made the announcement of aligning by 2060 to net zero, I really doubt how that can be achieved. However, as an industry, you are not, when you have partnerships and alliances with global companies, and your clients are coming from, your investors are coming from, different regions, they are not speaking to you about Nigeria's CO2 net zero target of 2060. They are speaking to you about a net zero target of 2050, which is the globally agreed goal. So it's always important to keep policies, before you, your regional policies before you, but also have the global policies before you. The national determined contributions, like I said, talks a lot about what the built environment needs to do to achieve a climate feature. And 136 countries have submitted these NDCs, but I see that they're constantly being updated. They're just updated because, you know, every year you find out that there are new industry realities, and then you need to update. The UNFCCC monitors these NDCs, so it's important that before you begin to speak about climate actions for your company or your business or net zero target setting, you look at those NDCs. Now, the real estate market especially needs to look out for more regulatory enforcement, because as the governments are are required to make these pledges and the announcement, they're going to want to achieve it through industry. And industry is going to want to enforce it through the businesses, through the private sector, especially, you know, and you don't want to lose revenue because you were not prepared to align, you know, with policy changes. So of course, we have consumers and we have private sectors who are trying to align with the 1.50 warming pathway, and you need to also look at those kinds of expectations, you know, but I know that these ambitions change from time to time, like I said, and if you want to avoid these financial repercussions, taxes, and what have you, then it's important that you begin, you know, to develop a plan or a proposal for net zero before 2050 or by 2050. So these are just for adaptation for African countries. These are the areas that policies have mainly talked about. Most NDCs prioritize agriculture and food security as a way of climate mitigation and adaptation. And I was surprised to see that education was way down below. I thought it should be higher because the awareness on climate change is actually very poor. And if we have increased awareness, I think we would get increased investments as well. So this is another reality that we have to confront. And I'm sure that the finance experts that have contributed in this conference have talked a lot, you know, about financing, but there is regulation that is coming. And for those of us in the sustainability space, we are closely monitoring those regulations just to see, you know, what actions we need to consider in the short term, medium term, long term, and then what opportunities also that we can leverage. But really, really important one for us in Nigeria is the green funds that are being received. I think the Lagos State government received, I'm not so sure of the amount now, but they've received significant green funding from the Green Climate Fund. You know, there are other funding agencies, and they always have requirements for providing this funding. But on the flip side is the regulation also that can lead to loss of revenue, you know, that can affect your business, that can affect your performance on, you know, on the exchange if you're listed on the stock exchange. So we need to think about how are we going to improve our designs? How are we going to rejig our product portfolio? You know, that's something a lot of people don't think about. You know, for the cement sector, for instance, it's concerning really that the way cement is produced from limestone, you would think that there will be other ways that it would be less energy intensive, you know, but as far as this technology has not significantly changed, you have to think about innovative ways and creative ways to still meet the needs. Of course, you don't want to make products, you know, that also threaten lives in human beings. Products that are not durable, concrete, for instance, you know, that can lead to collapse of buildings because you watered down, you know, the components, the properties used in making that material. You don't want to do that, but you can think about how you can integrate things like fly ash, how you can integrate, you know, other alternative raw materials that will give you the same outcome. So think about your product portfolio, and here's also an opportunity for architects and designers. You know, think about designs, you know, that actually can speak to climate financing regulation. And very, very importantly, you need to have an MRV system in place. So if you don't have a monitoring, reporting, and valuation system, you need to have that now. Data, there's no time, in climate action that data has been this important. There's never been a time like this time. So you definitely need to think about how you document all of this and how your data is kept safe. I know that ESG is a growing term in the financing world, and I try not to replace ESG with sustainability because it's not the same thing. It's actually not the same thing in my perspective. I just think that, we need a benchmark. We need some criteria. Investors just want to see a list of KPIs, especially specific to your industry, before saying that, okay, you're meeting this regulation or you meet this criteria. And this is why we have environmental, social, and governance. However, sustainability is not limited to those factors you call environmental, social, and governance. If you view sustainability in that way, I'm sorry, but this is a box ticking exercise that you are doing, and you are not going to achieve sustainability. But because of financial regulations, we need to understand what these factors that are environmental in our context and document them through an MRV system. On the right of the slide, I just shared some, of the kinds of opportunities, that exist when you consider financing for climate action. Okay, so we've talked about insurance premiums, we've talked about your asset value and desirability, we've talked about reducing costs, and of course there are circularity opportunities also that will save you cost, and the green credentials of your product portfolio. Now, this is another really, really concerning reality for African businesses: waste. Waste. I'm privileged to, privileged, yes, it is. The word is privileged to live in a state that generates a lot of Africa's waste. So from the image, that you see now, you can see that Lagos, Nigeria, and then of course Lagos is the capital, is the capital of all commercial waste for now. We generate greater than 20,000 tons of municipal solid waste. It's incredible. We have landfills everywhere. We have areas that have been taken over by waste. It's an incredible problem. And it really worries me to see that there's still a lot of waste coming into Africa. We have a lot of e-waste that is still coming into Africa. And this is why they call us a dumping ground. We are generating so much waste, and yet we are receiving a lot of waste. How does this impact the build sector? It impacts the build sector greatly. So now we are talking about costs, we are talking about energy, we're talking about circularity, and yet we're generating so much waste. I think that Africa is yet to discover and tap the opportunities of reusing her waste. When we think about fuels, alternative fuels that are being produced in parts of the world, a lot of them are coming from waste. In the cement industry, we do have companies that have achieved substitution rates, like thermal substitution rates of up to 50, 75%, and all of this comes from waste. But here we are under the rising prices, inflation prices of fossil fuels, diesel, and what have you, and yet we have heaps and piles of waste that can, through technology and science, of course, can be converted to hydrogen or other kinds of biofuel. And the gap, of course, is technology. Technology. How can we manage the growth of this waste management market? How can we take advantage of this waste market to reduce cost, of course, to mitigate climate change, and also for adaptation, because there's huge money in waste. Even things as simple as segregating waste between plastics or paper or oils, or this is a culture that we have not fully developed. And I know that the real estate design can begin to consider ways that besides the materials that you use, design, properties, facilities in ways that make it easy to segregate waste. I've implemented a lot of projects where we are implementing circular economy, and we're trying to retrieve a lot of waste. We segregate the waste, and by the time the waste collecting agencies come, you would not believe that they put all the waste back together after all the effort, enlightening people, providing bins. Sometimes it's just, oh, I don't like the corner where the bin was placed, or there was no space for the bin to be placed, and so I put it away, and someone comes to throw their trash and they put all, so this is where design comes in. How do we design our properties? Do we really think about how it affects waste management? How does it exacerbate the waste situation in the region? Now, this is like the elephant in the room whenever climate change is being discussed. Energy poverty in Africa is real. It is really, really real. And the case I'm just going to make, apart from the fact that we need to pay attention to our national determined contributions on energy efficiency, the point I would just really like to make is that African businesses need to consider a hybrid solution. I know there's been a lot of talk about renewable energy and how our energy transition has to, but I don't know about Ghana, but in Nigeria, I use a solar system, right? Now, the solar system is expensive, it's not cheap. I have to import the batteries, right? Okay. And we have the Forex issues. So I am still relying on materials that are got from outside. How is that sustainable? That's not sustainable. So when we argue about moving away totally from fossil fuels and moving to renewable energy, I think about infrastructure. I think about the technology. I think about our self-reliance as African businesses. Do I have to import all the parts to my solar system? Do I have to depend on Forex? If I don't have Forex, I go back to fossil fuels. Okay. And then what about investing more in our gas reserves? Why is natural gas in the ground? And then we are so much hooked on oil. For us in Nigeria, it's oil, oil, oil. And I understand that we have even much more gas reserves than oil. Okay, and gas obviously is a cleaner form of energy. So I advocate for a hybrid system where there's a combination of um, fossil fuels, cleaner energy like gas, of course, and then you have renewable energy in the mix, and then you have other alternative forms of fuel. For the cement industry, for in fact, it's a huge consumer of waste. So you can actually convert a lot of waste to alternative fuels, by combusting them in the kilns. So these are ways that you can design your energy mix in a way, that it reduces CO2 emissions. It addresses the waste problem, okay? It does not exacerbate energy poverty because we still have to keep producing and we still have to keep earning a living. It does not disrupt economic development. So this is the mix I believe that Africa needs. Africa needs an energy mix. To say that we are moving fully to solar, or we are moving to wind energy, or we're going to depend solely on hydro energy, we're not quite there yet. And I think that we just need to invest more in hybrid systems to manage our energy efficiency challenges. So I'm just wondering how ready we are for decarbonization. When we talk about decarbonization, you would see that a lot of emphasis is laid on our sector, right? Okay, but we have other sectors that have less footprint, coming out with decarbonization plans and road. We have banks, we have, other sectors, industries that are coming up with decarbonization plans. So why do we want to delay this any further? This is not going to end. This is not going to stop. There's going to be that continuous demand from investors, from shareholders about how are you decarbonizing your sector.
And even though building material provides foundation for energy transition, I've seen lots of roadmaps developed by companies, and of course, ranges from energy mixes to changing your product for CK consumption. You want to think about your specific power consumption. You want to think about your electricity. There are lots of levers that you can just do an analysis of your business. A lot of times we have equipments, that are not performing optimally and efficiently. We have gaps, we have leakages of energy. So when people think that they cannot decarbonize, sometimes you need another eye to just come and look at your processes, and they're able to identify, for instance, conduct a false air mapping, and you find that there are actually aspects of your business where you could have reduced CO2 emissions. So this is where I'm going to encourage businesses in this sector to begin to build a greenhouse gas register, where you are able to identify if it's NOx, if it's SOx, all the KPIs for greenhouse gases that are related to your production process, and then begin to document them. So having come this far, I just want to stress that, for us in Africa, our climate action has to be holistic. It has to be holistic. I know that the business case is very strong in this conference. We've had experts talk about, all the different business cases, but I have seen that there's a tide that is moving, and because Africa is really in the spotlight now, by COP27 next year, almost every business in this room would be talking about their decarbonization plans. But please keep in mind that the larger value proposition, beyond your business case to exist, or to meet the requirements of your investors, or to attract funding, or for whatever, is the fact that you are an African business. You are an African business, and central to succeeding or meeting the needs of the African people, it's critical, it's central, to meeting the needs of the future generations, is our culture. Our culture, as defined, is a complex whole. It includes our beliefs, our arts, morals, law. So this is a fantastic platform to talk to the architects, to talk to the designers, to talk to the builders, because every discussion that has to do with climate change, that has to do with your business value proposition, integrating the African context. What is in it for us? In governance, we need this African context. We need to integrate our culture, because peace and security are critical, especially to addressing rural-urban migration problems. These are peculiar to Africa. We know what has happened in Darfur, Sudan, and we also know what's going on in Nigeria with the Fulani herdsmen crisis. And a lot of people don't realize that that is a fallout from climate change. When these farmers, predominant farmers in the northern part of Nigeria, are unable to produce as much as they were producing because of droughts, because of the reduced rainfall, a lot of them quit farming. We have hired a security guard in my compound who was a farmer, and he migrated to Lagos and decided that he came to Lagos to find a job. And after a while, he said, you know what? It's hard. It's hard. I need to find out if my farms are now producing. And he went back to find out. So security crisis is exacerbated by climate change. So it's important for us to ensure that we instill good governance in Africa. And this is one of the critical problems, or one of the inhibitions of our achieving climate resilience on the continent. Also, supply chain is a big proposition, is a bigger proposition because of the jobs, that can be lost. Look at the value chain of your business.
the value chain from the beginning to the end, every aspect of that business, from logistics, from those who are getting the raw materials, all of the aspects of the value chain for Africa, because now we have issues like child labor to deal with. This have lots of street trading, and then there's human rights abuses because of climate change. Our our proposition now is that we integrate health and well-being as well. So for the built environment, how do we look at the safety of our workers from the construction life cycle, from the beginning to the end? You know, a lot of times I see builders that have become so used to wearing PPEs that they just throw the PPE somewhere and they don't care about it. Or sometimes management does not provide these PPEs and they say, okay, well, I have to meet my targets anyway, and I go ahead and work. Okay, so what about resources that we use in practicing medicine? That's another way that climate change has affected our quality of life in Africa. Okay, so I know that there are plants, there are crops, you know, there are things pertaining to nature that we use in making indigenous medicine, you know, that help our health and well-being, but they're disappearing, they become extinct, you know, because our religious and belief systems. This is a broad. I'm wrapping up now. I'll be threatened by climate change because now the weather, um, its and patterns of life are being altered. So we need to consider that as part of our broader proposition. What about integrating indigenous knowledge with science? This is very important. The last time I was in Ethiopia, I actually saw these huts that were built with woven, you know, bamboo. You know, I don't really know how it's been made, but I'm told that it insulates the building from cold and then still keeps inside warm. So I don't know how all of those indigenous um, things, innovations can be integrated with science. I mean, why can we produce hydrogen from waste? I know it's a very technical science, but I still think that we need to look at how we integrate our indigenous knowledge as Africans in this sector as a way of addressing climate change. Of course, we know about ecosystems and biodiversity loss. I think it was in Zimbabwe that I hear that animals, about 2,500 animals from the South, a conservation center in the South, and now being transferred to the northern part of the country because of of arable land. We need to make sure we preserve our biodiversity. When the Western companies are urbanizing, can we think of landscaping solutions more? Can we think about preserving green spaces and not just concreting everywhere? We need to preserve these as African businesses. And finally, in conclusion, there can be no business case without a social case. People often ask me the E, the S, and the G, which is more important. And I do not claim that the E is more important. I believe in humanity, and I believe that E, that's environmental, becomes important because there are humans. Okay, so as African businesses in the real estate sector, let's always put humanity at the forefront. And this is a social case because there can be no business, there can be no environment, there can be no economic, there can be no governance if there are no humans. So there's greater awareness of our social value, which we need to integrate in every aspect of our climate action. And for Africa, we need not only talk about mitigation of climate change, reducing CO2 emissions, we also need to think about adaptation, which is has to do with people's livelihoods and people's quality of life. Both must go hand in hand if we seek to achieve climate action, mitigation, and resilience in African businesses. Thank you.
Indeed, there can be no business case without the social case. Thank you very much, Dr. Igazuma, all the way from Nigeria. If we have any questions, the podium is ready. We'll take 2 questions and we'll move on to our next speaker. If you have any question, please take a stroll to the podium and let's hear your question. Thank you. In the absence of any questions, thank you so much, Doctor, once again for your time all the way from Nigeria. We wish you a fruitful day and we hope to see you soon. Thank you. As we work together towards Agenda 2063 on our mission to building the Africa you and I want, it is safe to say that building sustainable cities and all the projects that we invest in is absolutely important. On that note, we'll take a very insightful presentation on sustainable master planning. It falls on my shoulder to introduce our next speaker. He's the Africa CEO for Land Afrique. He's in the person of Paulo Cruz. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for him.
Good morning, everyone. I've seen so many good presentations here today, and over the last 2 days. Today is the 3rd day. It's the best day. Not just because of all the speakers, but it's my daughter's birthday. So I want to start differently today. By going differently, well, we had a very good presentation before, a Nigerian lady. Our business is also based in Nigeria, so I can relate to a lot of things that she mentioned. I do think that the jollof is better here in Ghana than in Nigeria. I also need to say that I'm half Dutch. Hans is also Dutch, by the way. I'm also half Portuguese, and therefore I'm sorry to say that although you've won from Nigeria to go to the World Cup, your first game is against Portugal, so sorry for that. I want to make this a little bit different today. I want to have interaction. Yeah? Feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to ask me questions. I'm going to try to be contradictive. I'm going to try to challenge you. Challenge me. Ask me questions. Why? How? Where? When? Feel free. Eddie, he's already with a mic in the hand. Just raise your hand. He will go. We will stop, ask the question, and we take it from there. Okay? By going controversial and starting off with our little blue planet, it started off many, many billions of years ago, as you all know, and some of you probably still remember from history classes that it was basically one big continent, and it then all grew apart from each other, right? And during millions and billions of years, the sea levels rose and went down, and the climate and the temperature went up and went down. I'm not saying that there is no human impact into climate change, but maybe there's also an earthly impact into climate change. I'm trying to be controversial. Feel free to interrupt me, okay? How do I change? Oh, with this. So, sustainable master planning. We can talk a lot about sustainable master planning. Which button do I need to use, by the way? Yeah, here we go. So what is sustainable master planning? Well, in most of the cases, people will talk about, well, you need to design the whole thing. It's the engineering, the materials, and it's all true. First of all, the first thing that you normally do when you look at master planning is, okay, I got a site. What am I going to do with the site? How's the earth? How are the geotechs? How's the morphology? Can I reduce the cut and fill, the earth movements? By reducing all of that, I can reduce all my carbon footprints, blah, 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 blah. All true. Not going against that. Engineering of the houses. You will see there are EDGE certifications, there are other types of green building certifications, the types of materials that you can use, the efficiency. In my previous version of this slide, but I thought it was a little bit too aggressive. So, what are we then going to talk about today? I want to take this into a little bit different manner. And we're going to talk this about inclusive growth. That a sustainable master plan is here to create safe cities for everyone. Not just for the developer, not just for the big boys. I'm not referring to any specific song that's currently out there. But for everyone. So, and that's what we're all going to look at. So yes, the SDGs, we still use the SDGs, we also use the ESGs, etc. And I'm trying to have this presentation and link to our own examples that you can relate to something practical, okay? So let's make it easy for everyone. By going easy, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this off. So the SDGs, there are several of them. And from our perspective, number 11, sustainable cities and communities, is the most important one. Because that's, from our perspective, where it all begins with and where it all ends with. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, the first part of the SDGs is about poverty. Yeah? So we need to reduce inequalities. It means that people need to raise their standards of living and they need to have a job. Now I'm going to talk about us. So we as the Landafre Group, we are into several businesses, real estate, energy, agriculture, environment, and the last one is almost down there, food and beverage. But within the real estate, we have the jewel of the crown, Agbara Estate, which is in Lagos, by the way, 27 kilometers outside of Lagos. It's a 454 hectare, relating here to people who are more often thinking in acres, roughly almost 1,000 acres, industrial park. That industrial park is, has got many blue chip tenants. You see there 54 factories, already exists for quite a lot of years. It says plus 1,000 homes, I'm sorry, that's 700-ish. We've got schools, banks, and a lot of people employed. This is directly employed. You can, how much it is indirectly. So a few of the companies that we have there. So going for the SDGs, SDG number 1 is to create employment. Create employment. Because with employment, people get income. With income, they can finally start doing other things. I'm going very quickly through this. I got 56 slides, so we got several things going on. We got 2,600 homes developing. First phase is 109 bungalows. Ask me later about details if you're interested. It's ED certified. Dennis, who will be later on talking, he can talk about that, and now it's not working. So this is that 2,600 homes plan. It's within the estate. So from here you can basically walk to work. The entire estate is kitted out with all the infrastructures that you can imagine. Oh, and by the way, this is a private development. A private development. It is not done by the government. It was not the government that put in all the infrastructures. It was not the government that created the vision. Back in the days, there were no SDGs, of course, but there was no government who came with a vision. It was an individual, the late Chief Adeyemi Lawson, who came up with a vision to set up a mixed-use park, predominantly industrial, to create employment, and from there have people with income who can buy houses, have all the related infrastructures in it, gas, the roads, the lights, the telecoms, even a sewage treatment plant. But again, this is a private initiative. One of the things that we're currently working at is a tech park. It's in fact next to that 2,600 homes park. We signed with MTN end last year a partnership for to put in fiber into the entire park. By the way, we also got an entire network of Shell natural gas. We heard earlier about natural gas. Very important gas. It is ridiculous that nowadays we have so much gas projects existing and so much gas under the ground in projects. And we are flaring gas. For those who don't know, flaring gas means that you are producing gas that you cannot sell and thus I need to burn it. That's what we're doing here in Ghana. We are getting gas out of the ground, out of the sea. That's there in, what is it, Abwadze, coming up, and we're flaring it. And then the price that we have is so high. At the time I was doing, by the way, an industrial park in Takoradi. My tenant, a German giant, Knauf, German worldwide leader in plasterboards, for those who are into construction here, they wanted to set up a factory there with us. And they decided not to come because of the gas price. Can you imagine that? We have so much gas, and a client, a huge international client, does not come because of the gas price. And if you also think about it, I don't know what you pay back home for ECG, but I know that everyone has had recently an increase in their ECG tariffs, right? So why don't we get cheaper gas internally here for Ghana for our own power generation? There are a few things that don't make sense. When this previous lady, I forgot her name, was talking about we need to use better our own resources, yes, we do, but also in a logical way, in a way that it makes sense for the country, not just for one or two. I'm not talking about politicians, by the way, or any specific one. We're setting up a warehouse park. Interestingly enough, the moment that you talk with certain type of clients who have certain demands, you probably heard it yesterday from Mr. Michael from the US State Department. When you have certain demands, there is a certain market also for it. The moment that we announced this to a few of our blue chip tenants, I already got 30% pre-leased and I haven't started construction yet. We're setting up our own IPP, 100 megawatt. First 42 megawatt has already been bought. It's a gas turbine coming from France. This was bought last year. It has been dismantled. We're hopefully shipping it in November to Nigeria. Interestingly enough, I need 30 megawatt to be project viable. I already got 27 megawatts subscribed. Oh, an independent power project. So we're setting up our own power plant. It's a very nice system. Besides the gas turbine, it also has a heat recovery part to it. It's called the CHP plant. It also comes with a 10 megawatt battery system, so that there are no power fluctuations. And if you need to switch over to another power source, that you don't feel that. Because when companies need to produce something, there's nothing worse than a power outage or even a power fluctuation for the whole production line to stop, to lose the raw material, to lose the man hours, to damage equipment. And that is one of the reasons why we continue still to import a lot of equipment, a lot of materials into Africa. Previous presentation was talking about we need to produce locally. Yes, we do. But before that, we first need to get our things right. And one of them is power. I was previously even talking with somebody else who even said, yeah, and what about the roads? Yeah, it's true. We all know, the lady from Kumasi, it's above Kumasi, where you got all those crops getting rotten, who are not being able to come here down to the big cities, because there is no infrastructure. I'm trying to be controversial. Please, talk to me. Challenge me. Come on. So, with this power project, something that we had to do of our own, because what was being provided by the government or by the entities lately indicated by the government, they do not have any respect for the end user, independently if it's an industrial or a residential. Sincerely, needed does ECG here in Ghana. But when something like a small power outage, I'm going to look again to Hans. I recall 1 year, 2 years ago, there was a small power outage in the Netherlands, right? For how many weeks was that front page? So there was front page news for several days, yeah, several weeks. If people could complain to the power company, you got reimbursed if you had things in your freezer that got rotten, if an equipment got damaged. Now think again. How many power out this month? Has anyone claimed anything to ECG? No, because we take this for granted. We shouldn't take this for granted, because this is the basis of what we live upon. I was last week already super stressed when MTN was for 1.5 days not giving me internet. Now imagine without power. Yeah? Power is the basis for things to operate nowadays. Yes, I see a hand, finally, please. I'm saying that we need to raise the standard. And by raising the standard, we need to have a voice, and don't be afraid to speak out. We need to complain. That's what we need to do. If I'm not satisfied with something, I say that I'm not satisfied. Yes, I'm always that Obruni that's always complaining. That's true, yes. But that's who I am. Because I try to get things better. Not because I'm trying to be the annoying Obruni, but because I'm trying to get things better. Well, I think that when election comes, someone needs to draw a lesson from that. You see in several other countries other things happening where the usual ruling powers for decades are no longer there. People start to think, people start to get educated. It's time to think and it's time to speak up and to make decisions by yourself. Yes. Gassem, the Gassem guy. Hi. Heidelberg, Mr. Heidelberg. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Oh, because there's a German guy there also there over there. You have a loud voice. Come on, speak up. Correct. So we get our own licenses from the government, and we invoice directly to the users. We're also setting up, besides the power generation, we're getting a second license, which is for power distribution, only within our own park. So that's in relation to that. Coming back to your first question, I am not a Ghanaian yet. I hope to one day. I've been for 16 years in Africa, the last 4 years in Ghana, and although the first country that welcomed me was Angola, and I will forever keep it in my heart, I feel home here in Ghana. And it's not because of the jollof, by the way. But it is up to the voters. The voters decide what to do. But you also need to have an alternative to vote upon. So until the day that I can vote here, I will then speak about that. It's not my moment yet. It's your moment.
It is, and those of us who vote are speaking up. Hopefully someone hears. Final thing is the frustration with someone not taking the right decisions. And the example is, and I might sound a bit controversial here, and I might also sound like an anti-competition person, but no. There's no level playing field for industry players. If you know someone up there, you get the best of the cherry, and that's actually very bad. A typical example is you have a cement company pop up in the midst of residential area. The residents gather to fight it. The regulatory bodies, EPA, all fail the cement company because it's not supposed to be where it is. And someone places a call and said, just let them alone, let them do their business. And we go back to business as usual. So it's one of the things that frustrates business people. And
Correct.
it's a real thing.
Correct. And that is why we are where we are today. Africa, Mother Africa, it has everything to be the #1 continent in the world. And you all know where we are today. I'm not going to say it. Shall I continue? So, I'm going quickly to my own company just to show you a few things so that we can come back to the SDGs. So besides that, we're also going much more green than just only gas. We're also putting up solar plants close to Abuja. We have another project there of 8,500 hectares, so times 2.5, that is what, almost 18,000 acres, something like that. We need to change the batteries of this. This is, by the way, that power plant that we're putting there. Interesting part of this power plant is that we also have a gigantic, just talking about sustainability and about the green side of things, we also have a gigantic sewage treatment plant, which we are refurbishing also. We've just signed in early July an agreement to that will use the sludge from the sewage to produce biogas, and we will feed into this power project. So we will have shell gas, we will have biogas, we'll have our own gas storage. So we'll have 3 different gas sources for this project. We all know that when you talk about power in Africa, you need to have redundancy. So the more you have, the better.
So Paulo, just a very quick question for myself.
Yes, Eddie.
Everybody knows that.
By the way, Eddie was the first broker that I met here in Ghana.
Every day. But the word affordable is relative. I'm curious to know what sort of pricing happened in that project, the one you just presented, the housing project. I just want to know. Thank you.
Good question. I need to bring my calculator to translate quickly the nairas to the dollars and going then to the cedis. But let me place it like this. First of all, the price is divided in several segments, so it's also for several classes, not 100% affordable. However, there is a definition of affordable, and the banks also use it when they do their appreciation of when you go for a mortgage. It's basically 30–35% of your monthly income. That is what you can afford to buy a home. That is what is affordable. Yeah. Now, we are often using the word affordable as a cheap home. That's not really the case, because then we should be talking about social housing. That's different. Yeah? So we're mixing up the terminology here. Yeah? One thing is social housing. You're building with subsidies. You're building at defined costs. The Netherlands, by the way, is a prime example after the Second World War with that. And they have quality social housing. Yeah? Nothing wrong with that. A lot of other countries, social housing is, oh gosh, you live in a social house? Oh, poor guy. Yeah? That's not the issue. Affordable is how much can you spend from your monthly income to buy a house. So in that respect, we start with 2-bedroom bungalows, which start at roughly 25 million naira. Don't ask me for the conversions now. And it goes up to the luxury 5-bedroom villas. Yeah? But it all depends on how much you can afford from your monthly income.
Someone has Google Converter on, so let's hear the figures.
I said 340,000 cedis. No, I did that myself.
Oh, so you put it in Ghana cedis, right? So 340,000 cedis for a 2-bedroom bungalow. 340,000 cedis for the 2-bedroom bungalow.
And
340,000.
and
Yes.
EDGE certified. You have some space at the back, space at the front to place 2 houses. It's a gated community, solar panels on the roof, harvesting rainwater, not only from your house but also from the whole drainage system that divides then in 2 separate, since we're talking about sustainability, let me also explain this quickly, because it's unique, at least for here. That also separates this water from the other waters, that we have a separate tank from this recycled grey water that's being used only for landscaping and for firefighting. Yeah? Because water also comes with a price.
That was my next question. What is the land size for
The
that
land
2
size
bedroom?
of the 2,600 homes is 27 hectares, so times 2.5 something. It is it's not dense, yeah, so it's very big, because we also got a space in the middle that we maintain as a green field. We call it our own central park. That has also sports fields on it. It's almost 3 hectares of green. There's lots of green in that development.
Land in my area in Tema sells currently at approximately 650,000 Ghana cedis, 70 by 100 portion land. So I guess that's affordable if we're using it in the sense of economically.
I don't know.
Only the land.
We need to do the calculations. We need to see the land, the morphology, geotechs, blah 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 blah. How far is electricity? How far is the road? How far is everything?
Service plus the closest to the grid core, so supply of electricity is not bad. Water supply is not bad. Road network is a bit dense, because tell me where there's no traffic in Ghana, but if I'm comparing like to like, I'm still thinking $65,000 compared to $35,000 for a whole house, depending on the land size you talk about.
Yep.
That still can be classified as affordable.
Here you go. That's interesting. Since you're talking about Tema and talking about interesting, I continue to hope to be controversial and jump in. So a little bit further, Gassem guy, you have that, what's it called again?
His name is Benny.
Benny, thank you. I will never forget it anymore. Eddie and Benny. Saglemi. Now that's an interesting subject. Supposedly 5,000 homes, $172 million. Brazilian contractor, OIS. They speak Portuguese, by the way, but I have nothing to do with that. Then it was reduced to 1,024 homes. No one is living there. It's a ghost town. No infrastructure connected, but almost 172 has evaporated. That's interesting. I would love to see what the current minister has to say about that, because it was with the previous minister. But that's how things are going. That's why we're not moving on with this country. Imagine if the rest of those funds would have been applied in the infrastructure. People would be living there. That would have been a nice project. But again, we've spent almost $200 million into nothing, into a ghost town. So I wanted to go to my SDGs, and we do all those nice things. What I just mentioned, we try to be efficient in terms of sustainability and use the right things. We also got our own payments systems. We have a special agreements with the banks. We're now negotiating with IFC also for that. And we have our own philosophy. But going then to the SDGs. So what do? We create employment. Yeah? People with employment have income, means there is no more hunger, SDG 1. With that, they also get access to healthcare. We have a clinic within the park, and there's also a state hospital immediately outside of it. There are schools within the park. We're now setting up together with GIZ, the German Development Gesellschaft for whatever. We're setting up a vocational training school, so that people from the industries, but also from the surrounding communities, can go there. We make no differences between gender, religion, or sexual orientation, or even black or white guys. I'm the only white guy in the company, by the way. I already spoke about water and about the sewage system. It's quite unique what we are doing there in terms of sewage. A private entity setting up their own sewage system, and now also getting biogas from it, creating also fertilizer as a private entity and on a certain scale. 43,000 square meter of sewage treatment plant is what we have. It's gigantic. I already spoke about energy. So we reduce the electricity bill, but we also provide much better quality of power and constant power. Yes. Yes. We can generate it cheaper and better. It will be operating Q4 2023. As I mentioned, we create employment, not just by the factories, but also when we are constructing things. So constructing the factories, constructing these 2,600 homes, etc. Our focus is on innovation. That's why we have the tech hub, the industries, and with all the corresponding infrastructure. That's why we already have one fiber to the entire park. There's another fiber coming also into it. We already have other telecom systems into the park. Everything that's necessary for infrastructure is already there. We're transiting to the formal sector. And with that, we're reducing the high inequalities. We're also contributing to the reduction of health issues. Because we all know that when you buy food and certain things from those vendors on the street, and I've done it also quite often, and it's very handy, by the way, when you are for hours in traffic, but we all know that it doesn't have the same condition if you buy it in a certain place where it's correctly stored at the right temperature in the right hygienic conditions. We also need to be realistic about ourselves and know that we cannot execute a huge plan immediately at once. The lady before spoke about a very nice development in Lagos. For those who know, it's called Eco Atlantic. Again, it's almost like a ghost town. All the infrastructure is laid down, but you only got 2 or 3 buildings up. 95% is empty. Yeah? So it needs to be done in a modular way, in a way that it makes sense for everyone. Because at the end of the day, as a private entity, we're here to make money. Yes, please. Sorry, there's something coming with the microphone.
With the example you just gave, with the infrastructure in building a whole bunch of homes, etc., but nobody occupying those homes, a lot of times developers have their break-even point, so they'll build to that capacity. What do you think happened in that situation? Was it marketing? What was the missing point? Because they're going to build to the point where they know they're going to make money.
You mean from that example that I just gave?
Yes, where you said I think your point was that they did too much too soon.
There are developments and there are developments. And some of them are doing it with own funds and in a certain ethical way, and others don't. And I'm not going to say any more about it.
I also have a question. This is an amazing project, by the way. Just curious why you chose to harvest and generate and support your own energy in that energy plant versus looking at solar energy, which may use less resources in terms of building a structure and operating that structure.
Several reasons. Number one, we already have Shell gas infrastructure in the park. Good question, by the way. Number two, this gas turbine that we bought was an opportunity in the market. second hand, but in very good condition. So we couldn't resist. However, you probably noticed that I said that it's a 100 megawatt IPP. This is only the first part of 42 megawatts. The rest is planned to be solar. Another reason is that for solar you need a lot of space, and we all know that real estate space costs money. And in that perspective, it's a CHP plant and gas turbine only uses. We have 2.3 hectares, but in reality, I only need 2,000 square meters. So through education, the communities become more and more responsible in their consumptions. And that's true, because this biogas product that we're doing, it's going 80% back into our power plant, but 20% is also going for cooking gas. So the community also benefits from this, and we're already promoting that with them. Reducing carbon footprints, renewable energy, recycling of the water sources, but also now of the sewage, promotes the climate action. So you're probably noticing that by going through all these points are basically corresponding to the SDGs. And what I'm trying to show here is that as a private entity, you can look at the SDGs, and I just continue to click on this. You can look at the SDGs in a more practical manner and apply them. These are pictures from our park, by the way. And apply them in such a way that it makes sense, not just for yourself in a profitable way, but that you can build your business upon that, that you can have inclusive growth, that everyone can benefit from this, all the communities, people get employed, people get houses, people get health, people get education. The whole ecosystem works. SDG is a nice word that we have nowadays. It's a very nice terminology. But when this started, back in the 70s, there was no SDG. It was someone who had a vision and who had ethics and put it into works. Yes?
When you started this development and you had the plan of the phases, how did you build the ratio of employment to residential housing? Like, how did you plot that? What was the order of building?
Honest answer, organic. We didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of businessmen, at a certain point, you need to take a decision. It's a go or no go. Yeah? Everyone who comes with nice tables and all the speculations, they're just numbers. Reality always shows you otherwise. I've never seen any project going 100% according to plan. Neither in terms of timing, neither in terms of numbers. Even the design is not 100% equal. That's why you have as-built drawings, because they're not exactly built as it was originally designed. Feel free. More questions? Oh, these are the bungalows, by the way. And yes, we're planning to come to Ghana, if you're curious about that. No, we haven't bought land yet. Yes, I've looked at Seklemi, but I'm not interested. The project itself is nice, but the problems are too big, and it will be a court case for many years to come. I got other ways to spend my time. So this is the school that we have there. It's one of the better schools in Nigeria, award-winning, by the way. Yes, Benny, you see, it's no more gas and man.
Yes, Paolo. I think we have one thing in common. I would not be surprised you support Cristiano Ronaldo. He's a fan as well. I also support him.
Let's go.
But just be sure if you try to put that that idea into action in Ghana, you go for the best cement. I'll be here to help.
So listen, if I go back, and I don't know sure if I put it there, but I cannot do it with you guys because you already are in Nigeria. We have 4,200 hectares for cement business to deploy in Nigeria also, by the way. But We can talk about it later.
May I ask a question?
Please. Name, please.
My name is Michael Lesh. This is a question not really only out of your presentation, but it's a theme that's coming through is infrastructure, roads, energy, sustainable development, and so on. The scale that's required, and you gave a good example of bringing crops from the north down so that there's business and, you know, using your own resources. What do you recommend as the best value proposition to present to the government to get them to invest? Because it's not realistic to expect private developers to building a nation's roads and power grids, you know, to serve everybody. That's the role of the government on a large scale. What's the best, or what's a recommended strategy to make the government invest? I mean, it's a long-term thing, obviously. Do you have any experience or suggestions on a path forward for doing that?
First, a question not directed to you. Eddie, are we recording this?
I'm not.
Well, the first answer, and I think I already tipped on it a few times, is that the taxpayers' money is not spent wisely, if I can put it in a nice way. But there are other ways to do it. I was in a working group not so long ago here in Ghana to look at exactly at that, the problems. It was with what do you call it again? Corn, maize. And that whole value chain was full of problems. Yeah. So you can create a they call it a public-private partnership. It's not only government. Yeah. For instance, there's a lot of corn being made here in Ghana. But at the end of the day, Nestle, just as an example, the type of corn that is made up there is done with the wrong seeds. The way how the farmers are dealing with it is not in the right manner that it creates the best type of solution of corn from it. The way how it's sorted is not the best way. The roads are not the best. The way how it's stored, it's not stored correctly. And then finally, when it gets down here, it's not coming down here in the best state. It's cheaper for them to import better quality corn from the US or from Brazil than to bring it from up north. That's the hard reality that we're facing here. So what is the solution for this? People need to sit around the table and be demanding. One of the things that you see in a few other African countries is people who have, companies that have immense tax to pay, give them a tax benefit and let them finance infrastructures. It's a way of doing it. No more questions? So, at the end of the day, what we also try to achieve is to reduce the inequality. The previous presentation already spoke about the social part, and I think that's very important, because there's nothing better at the end of the day. At least for me, it's always heartwarming when I see a smile on a child's face. Not because it's my daughter's birthday today, that also, of course, but it is important that we always care for each other, and that at the end of the day that we do the right thing. We're all humans. Thank you for your time.
Paulo, please tell your daughter I said happy birthday.
Thank you very much. We just heard from the Africa CEO of Land Afrique, Mr. Paulo Cruz. Round of applause for him one more time, ladies and gentlemen. And so before we go for our lunch break, we'll have to enjoy some property highlights from State Housing Company. To help us do that, let's make welcome a lady by the name Juliet Emefa Bonlab. Round of applause for her. Thank you.
Hello. Good
I
afternoon.
love Chris Rich.
Hello, good afternoon once again. Yeah, I'm Juliet Emefagbogla from the State Housing Company Limited, Accra. So I would want to talk to you about state housing, what we do, and then highlight a bit about our project, which is across the country. So state housing, as the name says, is a wholly government agency under the Ministry of Works and Housing. They are mother ministry, the policymakers. And then we are estate company. We construct, we build and sell to everybody. Our focus is to reduce the housing deficit in the country. That's our mandate. So at State Housing, we have estates across the regions, the whole region, 16 regions. In Accra, we have some at North Kaneshie, we have some at Adenta, and our current project is at Amrahia, where we have 2-bedroom semi-detached, 2-bedroom detached, 3-bedroom detached, and then 4-bedroom single story, which comes with facilities such as it's all en suite, fitted kitchen, 24-hour security service, and we as well do maintenance. That's facility maintenance service. We do it within in-house. State housing has been there since Nkrumah's time, everybody knows, and then we have most of our estates, for instance, Adenta Estate, Nyaniba Estate, Cantonment. So State Housing has a goodwill, as in our name has sold for itself because we built to last. With State Housing, even though it's a government agency, somebody would ask, if I buy now and should government change hands, what happens to my property? Would it be stalled? No, it won't be stalled, because if a different management goes, different one comes, and then we continue, because we've been tasked to provide decent and affordable houses for its populace. So we don't stall our projects. I mean, when you come to state housing, because it's state, we have litigation freelance. You wouldn't buy a property from state housing and then a different developer will come and say, I mean, it's for him or her, because our lands are acquired under a legal instrument. We are already certified. Our lands, our documents, when you go to Lands Commission, you have no problem with that. Also, all our estates are walled and gated, all our estates. Like I said, we do 24-hour security. So since it's security-wise, it's walled and gated, it's very, very, very secured. And the environment is very serene. State Housing has a very flexible payment term if you want to come and build with us or buy from us. We also give professional advice. That is, we don't do mass construction, but if you come to us with a peculiar problem, we would assign you to a customer service agent or a marketing officer who would listen to you, and then we'll build to your taste. Irrespective of the budget you have, we will build to suit your budget. So in Accra, like I said, our current project is at Amrahia. And anybody who would want to build with us wouldn't regret building with State Housing Company Limited. And so I urge everybody to walk into our offices or come to our stand where we'll direct you to the appropriate quarters for us to interact and then have a home of your own. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you very much. We've just heard from State Housing Company, and they have the exhibition in the exhibition hall. So please make sure you pass by their stand for more information, and they'll be happy to assist you. Right about now, family and friends, ladies and gentlemen, industry players and stakeholders, it's time for us to have lunch. Lunch is a strict 30 minutes. After lunch, we're going to hear from KPMG. So we crave and we indulge all of you to please make sure you come back after 30 minutes. Lunch doesn't mean it's time to go home. It just means take a break and come back for the next few sessions. It's still Africa Real Estate Week, and we've been here. Thanks to Labadi Beach Hotel for hosting us. We just want to thank them so much. So far, so good. It's day 3. It's Green Day. Let's come back after lunch. Thank you.